Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Darby here with Joe Lissette. Ignore that name there, and we have a top eight. We've played 8 rounds of Pioneer action today, and we actually have a pretty diverse 8 decks showing up, and a few notable admissions. Lotus Breach not in our top 8, but we do have a Blue-Black Inverter, Bant Spirits, and even a spicy one, Boros Heroic even made an appearance.
Nice, good for them. Lotus Breach, yeah, it's one of the most powerful decks. It's a little tricky to play. I actually watched in round 8 a Lotus Breach player, game 1, clears the way with Wished for Thought Distortion, goes off, casts a million spells, goes for the Thought Circle win, gets decked by the opponent's Geiger Reach Sanitarium.
Oh. Oh, man. Yeah. See, Pioneer can surprise you with all the different ways.
Yeah, it definitely can.
And, here we do see our top 8. We're going to be hopping into the 1-8 match, which is going to feature Kyle Gunn on Bant Spirits versus Jacob Dyer on Simic Ramp, another deck that really leverages the power of Uro. The rest of our top 8, though, we have Josh Satterfield on Dimir Inverter and Dylan Husing on Mono Red. Other side of the bracket, Cody Murray on Dimir Inverter playing Bill Caminos on Sultai Delirium. And our final match, Mark Johnson on Boros Feather versus Alex Williams on Sultai Delirium. So interesting bracket. If you had to pick, Joe, who would you 2 picks be to be battling in the finals here?
Advance. All right, let's see. Now I messed this up the other time. Are we having a player advance from the top half or from the left and right half?
I think it's left and right.
Okay. Then I will choose, let's see. I think I'm going to choose, well, I would sure like it if Boros Feather got through. I don't know if I can really say that's too likely, though. I'm going to go with Inverter on the right over Sultai Delirium, and then Inverter over Delirium again from that side of the bracket. Other side, Bant Spirits versus Simic Ramp. I'm going to take Ramp, and I'm going to take Dimir Inverter versus Mono Red. How fast is that? Is that like the lightning fast red, or is this like a mid-sized?
It's like, it's 10-1 drop red.
Okay,
yeah.
okay. All right, I'll take red and Ramp, and then I'll take Ramp. Wait, is the 1-8? Is Dyer's the 8 or the 1?
Yeah,
Dyer's the 8. I take it all back. I will take Mono Red beating Simic Ramp in that top 4. So that's what I'm going with. The word from the table is it's not looking good for Dyer, but I'm still going to go with Jacob to win his quarterfinal match.
Yeah, we're hanging out here because Jacob's currently mulliganing to 5, and I actually think that, with that information in hand, might as well use it. I do think that if Kyle can advance into the semifinals, I'm actually pretty happy to play Bant Spirits into Inverter, and if he can advance and play Inverter again in the finals, that seems like a great setup. So looks like players are ready to go, so why don't we dive on in, and here we'll see Kyle playing first with Bant Spirits and getting some pregame tickling action in.
I don't know. That looked slightly awkward if you're on the receiving end of that and you don't know what's coming. I was one time on an attempted handshake starting top 8, which the other player turned into a high five, and that was unexpected, and we missed, and really it was unfortunate that the camera picked it up. Probably the same as for this one.
Right. I think it's really important to appreciate the extra ways you can make yourself look like a fool. I take joy in it every day, because otherwise you just,
Yeah, there's lots.
And here we have a pretty slow start. Kyle playing 2 lands, I think under the plan to cast a Rattle Chains on end step. And, Jacob's Simic Ramp deck not having one of the 1-drops. There's 8 total between Arboreal Grazer and Llanowar Elf, and it's a pretty, I think, important piece to kind of stay ahead of a Spirits player on the play.
Yeah, looks like World Breakers and such in hand. We're having the payoffs is nice, but it's going to be a while before we get there.
Yeah, I do think that Ramp is very much a critical mass deck. You do need your first 7 to 8 mana sources, things to play once you're there, and you can't really miss a beat up the chain, or your payoffs tend to be a little bit slow. So here we see Satyr Wayfinder, which is solid. It's really an important step to making an Uro on the battlefield a real possibility.
And Jacob does have lands in hand, so even though we're not getting anywhere quickly, we are going to be hitting the land drops, it looks like, for a couple more turns. But pressure is going to be mounting very quickly, and a Arboreal Grazer sure would be nice to actually be able to block some of these creatures.
Yeah, it's always brutal when our Boreal Grazer can function as kind of like a Mox Diamond that's able to block effectively. I think it's a big part of what makes Lotus Breach successful against aggro decks, against Mono Black in particular. Bant Spirits has a lot of draws that result in 2-power flyers. And, here we see Kyle doing his best to beat down, deploying an end-step Brazen Bar, and I think that makes sense. There's not a ton that you're really excited to bounce in the ramp deck. A lot of these cards do come into play with some immediate value.
This ramp deck is going to really need to hit something good on turn 5 here. Cavalier of Thorns would help. Ballista is even going to be... Yeah, it's not going to matter. I mean, currently, it could kill the Brazen Borrower. I guess that would help. But Uro sounds good to me.
Yeah, kind of interesting. Yeah, Jacob life total is super low to the point that a Cavalier couldn't actually block enough. So, yeah, not really having any ramp and being on the draw. That's just kind of, I think, feeling the effects of a Mold of 5 there for Jacob.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's you need both pieces, and you need the ramp spells in the opener, and they just weren't there. So, okay. All right, so we're going to have the deck list come up. These are enabled in Cardboard Live if you're watching at home on the computer, and we'll just pause a second while the director gets us there, or not, or we'll just go through them and he'll catch up. So we have Simic Ramp sideboard, which is obviously we're down the game here and we need to do some catching up. We've got 1 Tireless Tracker, 2 Graph Digger's Cage, 2 Damping Sphere, 1 Perilous Vault, 2 Ether Gust, 1 Negate, 3 Unravel the Ether, and 3 Mystical Disputes. So Mystical Disputes counters the bulk of the creatures in the deck, so that's generally going to be fairly useful. Perilous Vault is interesting. That's not a card I even realized was in the format. It's a 4-mana artifact, I believe, and it's 5. It's like an Divinal's Disc for old school players. 4 mana to play, 5 mana to blow it up and exile everything on the board. Not just, Oblivion Stone is the card comparison I should have used, but we do exile everything, although it costs 1 more mana to put it on the board. That seems slow to me.
Yeah, I think that if you can cast it a turn ahead of schedule, you can probably do both parts before the game ends. And it sort of seems like a situation where there's not a ton of good sideboard options for Jacob, and I would not be surprised if he needed at least 4 cards to come in. So
it does get around Selfless Spirit, which is nice. But yeah, the Mystical Disputes are obviously those are big ones. Assuming that blue mana is available and untapped that early in the game. What do we got on the other side?
So for Kyle, we have a pretty diverse sideboard. 1 copy of Deputy of Detention, 3 copies of Reflector Mage, 2 Archangel Avacyn, 2 Damping Sphere, 2 Rest in Peace, 4 Mystical Dispute, and 1 Settle the Wreckage. And I think it's kind of interesting. There might be an opportunity to actually play a reasonable Mystical Dispute this game. Just not so much because Ramp has a ton of blue spells, just because so many of the spells just cost a ton of mana.
They're just expensive, yeah. Certainly that's reasonable that it might be able. I mean, if your opponent's paying 5 for a Cavalier, sure. I don't mind if I have to spend 3 to do it. We don't have any Damping Spheres. Probably not going to do much. Our Avacyn, though, that's a nice big threat, and the games might last long enough for that to matter.
Yeah, it seems reasonable. I feel like Bant kind of wants to assume the role of kind of just the Delver style deck, just curve out best you can and have 1 disruptive piece. And it does seem like, not a ton. I could see maybe Reflector Mage, getting a Cavalier out of the way. Bouncing an escaped Uro is actually a pretty big loss for your opponent in terms of, they invested a lot to get that on the battlefield. But I actually would suspect that Bant Spirits doesn't necessarily need to sideboard out a ton. No. Spectral Sailor, probably good enough just because you want to race and get power on as fast as possible. And, so I would expect Kyle to have pretty minimal changes. And honestly, I think it makes sense. Both players probably not super concerned about their opponent's decks.
No, yeah, I agree. This is going to be, for the most part, the main decks coming at each other again here. But hopefully for Jacob, on more cards in opening hand and going first, he's able to turn this one around a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that first game we saw from Simic Ramp, probably the absolute floor of how it can play.
Yeah.
It's tough. I think that, playing against a deck that can't interact with your Elvish Mystics Llanowar Elves at all is something that could really be leveraged here for the next 2 games. And again, even just in our Boreal Grazer, I think it's key that Jacob finds just some way to ramp on 1 mana, and I think that puts him in a big advantage playing first.
Yeah.
So we can go down to the table here. Players are just grabbing their hands for the second game. And
All right, so Jacob, really, yeah, like you said, we're looking for a 1-drop accelerant, and then a second land, and then something doing with the 3 mana on turn 2. That's really, we want to get ahead. Kyle doesn't have a good way to interact with that. I mean, he could have Wanderer for Pilgrimage, I suppose, but still, we want to be just moving. We want to accumulate more than 1 mana source per turn.
yeah, I think Jacob's hand is actually perfect for that. I saw a 1-mana elf, Pilgrimage, and at least 3 lands.
Okay.
So I think it makes sense to be willing to keep a hand that's heavier on mana and lighter on payoffs, just because there is so much top end in this Simic deck.
Yeah. Okay, so here we go. Players picking up, and turn 1 elf. Do we have a Wanderer in exchange on the other side? Maybe we do.
Yeah, the shock, it makes sense for a few reasons. You know, there is a world where you might like to Mystical Dispute an Uro. And I think more than that, it's just, you know, your opponent's really not going to beat you with that. So I think shocking here, just kind of leaving some things a mystery. It's, I think, relatively free.
Yeah, it's intimidating too. Like, yeah, I'm shocking. I don't care what the life points. What are you going to do about it?
And I think Kyle has at least 1 copy of Mystical Dispute in his opening hand, so you know he's going to need pressure before that really starts to pay off. But I think the curve is going to start this turn. I see at least Rattle Chains in his hands.
And even if we're disputing, I mean, we actually could dispute a Uro on turn 2, I suppose, if it came down to that. We didn't see it, but if it did come down, I imagine we're just going to fire it off before Kyle.
Yeah, and here we see a bit of an awkward Mystical Dispute for the turn there.
All right, well, another show of strength. Jacob just revealing his card, saying, you're not going to be able to stop me anyway. Here's what I have.
The beauty of this, to cast Cavalier of Thorns and put a blue land in play to go with that dispute is, I mean, yeah, Jacob's, this draw's perfect. I mean, turn 3 Cavalier on the play. Had the option to shock in that breeding pool to play dispute, but decides not to. I guess there's nothing that is that devastating that could be played this turn, although a Nebelgast Herald can actually take that Cavalier of Thorns out of combat for the foreseeable future.
Even then, though, that's tough to, I mean, it's not easy to race this, and presumably Jacob's board's going to be growing, as these ramp decks don't tend to slow down once they get started. What do we have? We have Mystical Dispute. There's some more land in the hand. Another elf.
Yeah, it seems a little bit thin on action. I think there's just some disruption in additional mana. And, you know, it's going to give Kyle a bit of a window to advance his board and kind of catch back up here. So here we do see the Nebelgast Herald, which is going to be pretty critical. And if Jacob decides to try and shift roles and start to play defense, that can really make that plan just not really work.
Okay, in for 4. This is, it's hard to feel good about that when you're already 11 facing down potentially 7 power of attackers and at least 5. Although I didn't see Jacob pick up this turn, but obviously he's got plenty more mana.
Yeah, I think that was a Walking Ballista.
Okay, well that's a 1 of, and that's tremendous.
Yeah, I think this is a situation where if you could tutor a card to the top, Walking Ballista would be up there. And, you know, currently no Lord effect from Kyle and just a board full of spirits that kind of get shredded by it. So, yeah, here we see Jacob going pretty heavily in, but still making sure to keep some mana up. You know, Mystical Dispute, I think a nice one to hold on to as well.
Yeah, so this is going to be for a 4/4, which is can immediately wipe out 2 creatures on the board, and it's not really going to be a whole lot of defense against this. It's going to be a dispute. Going to be disputed back. The last card in hand that Kyle already knew about. And with Kyle tapped out, do we just mow down those 2 creatures? I think we do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Waiting just runs the risk of a Lord being flashed in response and kind of having to, for lack of a better term, waste a Ballista counter. And yeah, Kyle is kind of locked out by the combination of big Reacher and big mana sink. And yeah, that was just as much of a clinic as game was for Kyle.
So we go to game 3. Jacob going back to being on the draw, but the hand he just had on the draw, it wasn't just that he was going first this game. Like, this hand was just more than functional, and the first game his hand was just nothing.
Yeah, I think the only difference from play draw with a hand like that is all of a sudden Mystical Dispute can tag the Cavalier of Thorns. You know, so that does kind of open up a wider window for Kyle's Banned Spirits deck to kind of line up the interaction. But still, just the power of the threats doesn't really change much depending on who's going first.
Right. So we have the sideboard again. You can read them this time that we went over previously. I don't think too much changes going first or going second here. If the Perilous Vault was coming in going first, maybe it goes back out now. But other than that, things are probably the same as they were last game.
Yeah, both players, don't really have too much. I mean, I think that just kind of the extra 3-mana removal spell type creatures for Kyle are kind of the most unsure things that could be coming in. Even just rebuying or forcing a Cavalier to be replayed could matter. That game was kind of far from being a close race, but it was kind of being positioned as one.
And if a Reflector Mage had hit that Cavalier, I mean, it's not as if Jacob was going to be able to untap on the interim turn and be able to do something else. It would have been just pass, and that's a best case for Reflector Mage. And I don't know if you can rely on that, but it certainly would have worked there.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's tough. You might prefer that effect in a card like Brazen Borrower too. So it's kind of it's tough, but Brazen Borrower with its benefits does kind of not exactly time walk your opponent. It doesn't strain the threat for a turn cycle. So that's an interesting kind of dynamic to balance there. And it looks like both players are taking a mulligan. Now, if you had to work off of low resources, do you have a deck that you prefer to be playing in this matchup?
I think I'd rather be on the Spirit side. The fewer cards we have, especially if we're down to 5, just because a couple lands and a couple creatures, they're almost interchangeable. They're all going to do something. Whereas the ramp side absolutely can draw a couple lands and a couple uncastable cards, and then just sit there and do nothing. That could easily happen. That basically is what happened in Game 1. So yeah, I definitely, with both players mulling, I would say that favors Kyle.
Yeah, I agree. I think the lower you go with ramp, the more dependent you are on Nissa's Pilgrimage in particular.
Yeah.
This ramp deck has very few ways to actually recoup card advantage that costs less than about 5 mana. So yeah, Pilgrimage is probably the best way for that. And I think if both players stick around on 6, we won't really feel those effects too much. But yeah, especially as we go lower and lower, I do think ramp gets quite handicapped.
Yeah, and it's not always that case in the archetypes. Like in Modern, for example, with Tron, with Green Tron, you could pick almost any number, and the lower number in any matchup, the lower the number starting hand size, the better it is for the Tron side, which is the ramp deck. And here, the ramp deck, we feel the other way around. So I think that's interesting. But here we go. Kyle has his 1-drop this game.
Yeah, both players have 1-drops. Mausoleum Wanderer for Kyle and Mox Diamond for Jacob here. And yeah, it's actually anything other than Supreme Phantom means that Arboreal Grazer is going to get a great block here. Ooh, and actually, I think a bit of a misstep there from Kyle. I think there might be a Temple Guard in the back of the hand that was actually not played. And we'll see. There's a Rattle Chains, so the attacks wouldn't have happened this turn, but that can actually cause a pretty big ripple effect in terms of how mana can be used moving forward.
So effectively cycle Uro, gain a land drop, and a Blast Zone, and that is a nice one. I mean, we're not going to blow it on 1. I think we're going to get it off 1 as soon as we can because our Grazer is doing just fine against this Mausoleum Wanderer. But the Lord numbers of 2 and 3, this is great. And it's not easy for Kyle to, there's no way to cheat your way around that.
Yeah, just a super brutal sequence. And, this is also setting up Jacob to ramp just 1/3/5. And if there's an untapped land 5, which I'm not sure if that Hinterland Harbor is actually coming into play untapped. Yeah, there's 3 just regular Simic Dual land. So missing on Cavalier here is huge, but Perilous Vault, I would say that's an acceptable substitution here.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be tough. So now we have one selective sweeper and 1 full sweeper on the board. Kyle's doesn't have a good answer to either one of them. And yeah, this is a card that, boy, hasn't seen much play in quite a while. I remember it was in blue-black control decks in Standard, maybe, I'm going to get this wrong, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, kind of Con Standard, Pearl Lake Ancient style. And it's really interesting because it's a sweeper that kind of hangs over your head and almost just stops you from committing to the board anymore. So Jacob could use it, and sometimes just to make land drops and extend the game. But here deciding that, this Cavalier of Thorns is going to play pretty good defense by itself while also letting me cast Uro if I want to. And I think that's a very sensible thing just to make the 5/6.
Yeah, and Kyle has to commit spell color to the board, not catching anything. It's just to have an attacker. And then, I mean, it's a card that's going to get nailed by the Perilous Vault whenever Jacob feels like he needs to get around to it. And sitting comfortably at 19, he's not going to be in any hurry.
Yeah, and the most kind of tough part about that for Kyle is that Spellqueller actually had a pretty legit target in Uro. I'm not having a great answer to that being escaped here. And we actually might see it just this turn because, if Jacob can resolve this, I mean, he's very solidly ahead on board. So the Perilous Fault, again, it's just, it gives him an out if anything goes kind of code red. But otherwise, he just might not even need it.
Yeah, we may see Blast Zone be, well, there's definitely options here. Blast Zone could go up to 3 and take down the majority of Kyle's board. On the other hand, we could just sit here and start attacking with Uro, and Kyle doesn't have a great way to answer that either.
Yeah, like throwing your board away to trade with one part of an Uro, you can't really make that exchange if you're Spirits and expect to win. There's kind of everything going wrong, and here we see our Boreal Grazer making use of every bit of mana.
Jacob with no cards in hand and tapped out with how many? 8, 10 land in play. That's a good couple turns.
Man. Yeah, this ramp deck's pretty powerful. It's, I think, mostly getting crowded out just by how rough it is to play against Inverter. But, it makes sense that it could be strong against Spirits. And, we're kind of seeing a lot of the elements come together here. Jacob really, I think, firing off a top-end draw.
Yeah, I mean, this is upper part of the range here. This is great. How's Kyle going to beat this? Reflector Mage it doesn't do anything. It clears one creature off the board. The Perilous Vault won't even have to kill, so that's not going to work.
Yeah, nothing like unsummoning a creature with an onboard Wrath, right? And yeah, now here we'll see if Jacob decides to start with an attack, and I think that's totally sensible too. Uro guaranteeing a card back really makes this. It can't be that much worse than like a 3-for-1 if this Uro gets killed here somehow.
Yeah, and Kyle's chump blocking is not appealing. Taking 6 feels like the best option, well, maybe even the only option, and then the same thing's going to happen next turn. This is not going to get better unless we have so many Lords out that we just get to a point where we can stop everything, but I don't see that happening.
Yeah, it looks like this is going to be a trade where Uro goes with just the Mausoleum Wanderer.
Okay.
And all things considered, I think you'd take that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That seems like a great trade for Kyle.
And here we see Grafdigger's Cage. I imagine that's pretty narrowly targeted for, probably has to be Collecting Company, right?
Yeah. I wonder if we would have liked to blow the Blast Zone there after the double block to keep the Uro alive and then also take down the other creature that blocked. That's maybe that's not worth considering. Maybe keeping the Blast on the board for 3 is just too valuable. Obviously it's showing here that it's definitely worth quite a bit.
Yeah, that's a tough one to balance. Uro in play does generate pretty immediate returns too, and that kind of allows Jacob to ratchet up the pressure just a touch earlier too even. And the Rattle Chains are finally starting to attack, but thanks to a lot of Uro work and our Boreal Grazer blocks, Jacob shrugs and says, I'll go to 22.
Yeah, no. There's a fly swatting at me, no problem. Crush you. So Cavalier comes in for 5 more. Jacob, I think, is at 23. There we go. Taking 2 more down. This is just bad trades all around for Kyle. He's got another land in hand.
And I think a Collected Company that it's actually getting sniped
shut down by
Grafdigger's Cage.
Well,
sometimes you have to shrug and say good beats, right?
Yeah. This is another creature with reach. Come down, wipe out choice of lands. Okay.
Okay, it wasn't Company Mystical Dispute. Still very similarly blanked with this spot. Being able to cast a 7-drop and comfortably play for Dispute.
There's the Company. I think it came off the top this turn.
All right, and Kyle casts it. Elects to, not even look because of that Grafdigger's Cage and play and extends the hand. And yeah, those were pretty strong games 2 and 3 from Jacob, and I think he pretty convincingly puts himself in the semifinals.
Yeah, and Kyle, our #1 seed, is now out of the event. Congratulations for him for mowing down through the Swiss, but the run ends here.
Yep. So, yeah, we can pull back to the booth. Looks like that was the last match of our quarterfinals, so I think we should be able to get the next round here to everyone pretty quickly. I don't think we're going to be doing a time-shifted round for this one, I don't think.
That went fast.
Yeah, and it's wild. We've got multiple Sultai decks in our top 8 too, but that's the beauty of Uro. Get close
I
and
suppose.
fast.
Okay, I was gonna say the fact that we had multiple Sultai decks and the round was over that quickly meant all the Sultai decks lost. But you're right. Uro can end games pretty quickly going the other way also.
Yeah, so that was a pretty wild and fast quarterfinal. So yeah, we're gonna be back with the semis in just a moment. It'll be Joe and Matt in the booth here. So we're looking forward to bringing the last 2 rounds of our Pioneer event here today in Indianapolis, Indiana, and we'll be back with you in just a moment.